Three, two, one.
Welcome to the Transfer Nation Videocast and Podcast. Transfer Nation aims to create a network and community of educators who work with and advocate for transfer and post-traditional college students. Our mission is to build community, transform culture, and empower success for transfer educators and students by sharing resources and celebrating all things transfer.
Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Nation Videocast and Podcast. My name is Chrissy and I'm a social media director with Transfer Nation. And I'm very excited to introduce you to today's guest on the Student Stories edition of the Transfer Nation podcast. We have a wonderful transfer student alumni with us today. She is an amazing advocate still for transfer students, even after graduating. Today we have Angela Kyle joining us. Angela, we're so excited to have you here. Can you start us off by telling us what schools you attended and where you transferred from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got quite the path I took for this journey I've been on. I started out at Western Oregon University back in '96. I know that ages me quite a bit, so just don't do the math on that. Then I went on to Mount Hood Community College doing the transitions program when I was a single parent. Eventually, years later, when my children were grown, finally it was time to jump back in and finish that degree. So I went to Clark College, and that's a community college in Vancouver, Washington. That's where I got my transfer degree. And then I transferred over to Central Washington University, and that's where I am now.
That is amazing. And I have to just start off right off the bat and say it's amazing that through that whole journey, you were also, it seems like an incredible mother, and that's really cool. And I'm really excited to dive into that more with you. But before we get into it, what we're starting to do on the podcast is asking guests to bring an artifact that resembles or resonates with their transfer journey. So Angela, do you want to describe the artifact that you brought today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was actually a hard thing to come up with. You would think it would be super easy. So at first, I actually went to my husband and said, "What do you think? What has helped me on this journey?" Immediately, he said, "Coffee, caffeine," and I'm sure a lot of college students can relate to that. The first thing I came up with was coffee cups. I love Wonder Woman. I have a Wonder Woman coffee cup. Has helped me through many a final. But I really want to dig a little deeper than that. And so what I'm holding is a family photo. I'm married with 4 children. 2 of them are now in college as well on their journey.
Wow.
Yes. See, not more aging. Don't do the math on how old I am. And then I have a daughter who is 9 years old, and then another son who is 13. So the family photo, just looking at their faces, looking at my husband, all of us together, that's honestly why I've been on this path, is for them. I mean, my children, I believe, look up to me as a role model, and I've made going to college something that's attainable. It doesn't seem so hard to achieve when you're seeing your mother go through it.
Wow. And that is amazing that you bring up that point, Angela, because I know another part of your journey that I hope we'll get into is that you're a first generation student. Is that correct? And so that's amazing that, you went into this journey and really had to find the nuts and bolts on your own, and you had to create your own unique pathway. And now you can impart that incredible knowledge onto your children. And that is just so inspiring and so excited to hear more. Yeah. So, but Angela, going back to the beginning of your journey, or, even in the middle of the journey, what do you feel like really inspired you to choose transfer pathway versus, maybe going to one school or going to a 4-year right away? What inspired the transfer pathway for you?
Honestly, I think it chose me. I think that I have been meant to go on this path, to go through all these ups and downs and turns, and to give up and quit and then really desire to get back into it, is because I'm supposed to be that person to help the next generation of students. So I think the transfer path really chose me. I know a big part also financially, I needed that affordability. I needed the flexibility of online coursework. of raising a family and balancing it with everything else that I do. So there's a
Mm,
piece of I had to make some real adult decisions on how to accomplish this goal of a degree. But also I sometimes feel when I look back at that long journey that I feel like it's this whole thing coming together that I'm supposed to go, or I had to go through all of those things, all those steps so that I can help, the next generation. So
absolutely. And that's incredible. And also I love what you brought up about like the online studying aspect, because that's such an invaluable resource. I know a lot of students, have had to been forced to get accustomed to that kind of studying. Um, but you're speaking of it as a positive, like as a parent, being able to study online and attend school online allowed me to balance and juggle all these different roles and identities. And I love that. And I would hope that students who might be listening, whether they're parenting students or any other student identities, would know, online studying is an amazing option and an
oh,
incredible resource to consider. So
it's definitely doable. It's a flexible way to accomplish what you need to do when it's not the only thing in your life, when you have
yeah.
other things to balance, to juggle. Juggling is a perfect description.
Speaking of, the identities and situations you had to juggle, were there important identities or situations or experiences that you had that you feel like really impacted your transfer journey?
Oh, definitely. I think going back to the beginning, being a first generation college student, not having family that has applied for college, that has filled out a FAFSA, that has navigated all of these pieces, was really a struggle, because I just jumped into that journey, that adventure, trying to figure it out on my own, finding mentors
Mhm.
along the way. So I think first generation was a big piece of my identity. Um, at one point when I was at Mount Hood Community College in the transitions program, I was a single mom. So being a single parent was another huge part of, really trying to be there for your children, doing it all on your own. And then on top of that, hey, let's go back to school too. So that was a huge piece of my identity.
Yeah.
Now I am married. I have 4 children. So being a mother is just a big part of who I am. But also, I'm a non-traditional student. I'm so much older and I'm returning after, let's just say, a long break. And that is a game changer. I think that was probably the biggest piece that in my mind I would say, well, it's been so long. Maybe I won't remember how to do these classes, or I'm not smart enough, or how can I fit in? College is supposed to be
Mm,
for younger students. I'm too old now. So those are the questions that would come in my head. I was the one saying those things to myself. No one else was saying you're too old. But I
mm,
think being a non-traditional, being an older student, and being a mother, those were huge pieces of my identity
yeah.
throughout this journey.
There's so many things you said that I just want to touch on, but first I have to say, you mentioned your husband suggested coffee as the artifact, and then you had your Wonder Woman mug. And I think that mug's perfect for you, Angela, because you are definitely Wonder Woman, a transfer Wonder Woman. I just had to say that first right off the bat.
Well,
Um,
I did take my cape off for this, but maybe I'll put it on real quick.
there you go. There you go. But something interesting that you said was you felt like at one point in the journey there was a lack of mentorship. And I think that's something that is so, so vital in the transfer journey. And especially for first generation students, as you're telling us now.
Mhm.
Did you feel like though, like eventually, did you have those mentors or programs or resources that supported you to eventually go on to transfer to the schools that you went to transfer to?
Absolutely. Yes. Many times. I mean, just recently I filled out a graduate application for grad school, and immediately there were a list of people that came to mind. When I think about Clark Community College, that was a big part of honestly my success. I gained a lot of confidence in community college, and it started off with a program that they have at Clark. It's called the WES. It's Workforce Education Services. And I had gotten unemployed and was on unemployment all of a sudden. And one of the programs was to check in with a local community college. And Rebecca Clivo was the caseworker there. And I remember sitting across from her desk, and she was such an advocate for, you can do this, you can do this. And I remember the very first term at Clark, I took one class because I was slow to get into it. And I remember getting an A. And I remember going and meeting her at her office and showing her the A that I got. And she was this cheerleader. She was so proud and so excited for me. And it was just this amazing moment of, hey, there's someone else that believes in me. I should start believing in myself. So definitely that program and working with Rebecca through those years that I was at Clark, she was a huge mentor. I still reach out to her to let her know, hey, I'm still doing it. You can still cheerlead for me. So that was amazing. And then transferring over to Central Washington University, same thing. Right at the beginning, I reached out to Professor Nicole Dunn, and she was my advisor for the program I chose. And I reached out and said, I'm really anxious. I'm, an older student. I feel confident from being in community college. I feel like I'm ready for this, but I'm a little hesitant. I'm a little anxious because what if these classes are more challenging for me? What if I'm not ready? And she was just amazing. If you can do this, you have the skill set, you have the determination and the motivation, which is huge. And just hearing her, and then, like I said, over the years, I've reached out to her for internships, which has led to my first job at the transfer center where I'm at now. So yes, those are the two big mentors that right away, without their support and encouragement, I think it would have been an even harder struggle.
I love that you had such foundational mentorship, like eventually. And from what you do now and the experience I'm just familiar that you've done, it seems like now you're on the giving end of the mentorship.
Absolutely.
And that is very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're involved in now and how you're advocating for transfer students now?
Definitely. And I have to say, I love being on this end of the spectrum now. This is the best feeling. So I have the privilege to work at the Central Washington University Transfer Center. We're only a year old, and it's amazing. I get to be, I get to be a peer ambassador. I work with Megan McConnell. She's the director of the program, and it's myself and one other peer ambassador. And it's great because not only are we both transfer students who have been through the whole process of transferring to Central, navigating financial aid, registrars, picking classes, all of that, but we're a voice for the students. We're there to listen. We're there to, when, for example, we just had a transfer symposium and there was a couple questions that came up, and being a student, I was able to say, hey, here's some student, advice, or here's a student perspective. So we get to be in those conversations, and it's amazing. It's a great experience. And we're doing peer mentoring appointments online right now. We're hoping to do in the future, eventually in person, but for now, online is great. Students can just schedule a Zoom meeting and they get to just ask us, whatever questions they have or what they're struggling with, or it could be as simple as, I don't know who my advisor is. But I have to say, it was really amazing because a couple weeks ago, a student who hadn't been accepted to Central yet had a Zoom meeting, and she just wanted to, ask some questions about Central. She wanted to know about, the weather and what it's like on campus, and said, I haven't gotten accepted yet, but I just wanted to, learn from a student. Loved it. It was a great conversation. And a lot of times that's where it ends. It's one conversation, you answer questions, and you really don't know. You don't know if that student, where they're at on their path. Yeah. Well, for me, it was great because she scheduled a second Zoom meeting just to tell me she'd gotten accepted to Central. And I had that whole moment where I got to be her cheerleader, and I was so excited for her. And it really brought back what I had gone through and getting to be her cheerleader. So it's pretty phenomenal.
That's so cool. And you mentioned Rebecca being your cheerleader, and now you're the cheerleader.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think You have touched a lot on your experience as a post-traditional and non-traditional student. Um, and I feel like the mentorship and perspective you have to offer, especially to students who share that experience with you, it is uplifting them. It is breaking the stigma. It's doing all those things, and that's just so incredible. And so I guess I want to know, again, going back to your personal transfer journey, what do you feel like inspired you to stay motivated and resilient through your experience, through, again, all the different hats, all the different roles that you were having to take on? What do you feel like kept you motivated and resilient?
That that's a great question. And again, I like to look at the journey, and I like to look at what I went through. We'll start off with at Clark College. Um, I made the greatest, most amazing, supportive, encouraging group of friends that I've ever had. And I miss them every day. It was with the Honor Society. It's called Phi Theta Kappa. And I got in with this group, and we just, first there was a little competition of who was getting higher grades and a little bit of bragging. But then all of a sudden it's supporting and encouraging, and we're doing activities, and then we're volunteering in the community. And it was just this amazing group of strong, empowering women. We're now all on different journeys at different universities, going here and there, but we still connect and check in. And it was just so motivating. Just such a great group of strong, smart, intelligent women coming together and just, supporting each other and encouraging each other. And then volunteering in the community was huge.
Love that.
It was hard. That was one of the hard parts of moving on and transferring to Central. I'm a good 4 hours away from most of them. And so getting over here, there was a little bit of that, oh, I'm going to miss that group that I had to go to, that support group of, oh, I didn't get the internship I wanted, or, oh, I can't believe how hard this accounting class is. I didn't have my people to go to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it felt like I was starting over. Honestly, sometimes I think transferring feels like you're just starting over again. And you
Absolutely.
wonder, do I really want to do this and try to find my people again? And yeah, it was great because getting over here, I still, and maybe it's part of the pandemic that we were still able to, communicate virtually and really had that push to stay connected. But it was also the family members that I had as well. So a big, huge piece is my husband. Without his constant support and encouragement, and then my children as well. There's so many times when my son will check in and say, "Are you done yet? Are we done with school now?" And I'm like, "No, not yet. Now we're gonna do grad school." Okay, why are we doing that? And then I'll explain it, and he'll be like, "Okay, let me know when you're done." I'm like, "Okay, will." And then I have the 9-year-old, and I really feel like, a role model, being the mother of a daughter, and she's wearing, wants to wear matching clothes. Today we're wearing our matching Rosa Parks t-shirts because she's studying.
Love.
She's studying Black history. So we got these matching Rosa Parks shirts to wear, and she's like this little mini me, and she'll bring out her laptop and want to study for finals together. So I think that he's a big motivator because she's seeing I have this strong mother figure, this empowering woman in my life, and she's doing this. She doesn't even question if college is going to be hard or not. Oh, she's just going to go. She's just going to do. And so I've switched that because for me, college was a big question mark, big question mark. And it's not going to be a question mark for her. If she wants to go, she can do it. If she needs support, she's got it. So I would say the motivation now that I don't have my people, I realize that I actually do this whole time have had the husband, the children, they're right there supporting me.
I love that. It's making me a little teary-eyed. Excuse my glossy tears, or my glossy eyes. And I want to say, Angela, your experience with your son, who you said was asking, "Are you done yet? Are you done yet?" That I have to include this. My mom was in grad school when I was in like kindergarten. And so I would call her while she was at school and I'd say, Mom, like, are you on recess yet? When's your recess? So your son asking that made me think of that. Cause you're a kid, you're just envisioning like, do you get to play on the playground? Like, when are you gonna get to go? And so you're already, but her doing that instilled that passion education. And that's what you're doing for your own children. And I feel like what's so important about what you're saying is you're saying having a unit at first and all throughout, it was your community of friends at the community college, and then it was your family, and it was both. And I hope students hearing this can take away from you that what helps so much in the journey is having a unit, a community.
Yes.
And another thing you touched on that I want to bring back up that is really important is when you're transferring, a lot of times it can be difficult because it truly does feel like you're starting over, like you're starting from day one. And again, that just reiterates the point you're making, that you have to have a unit. You have to involve yourself in a community somehow, some way. And that will help so much all along. But I love that. And I think all these positive things we're talking about is a great transition to my next question, which is, what do you love about the transfer experience?
I love the education that I've received. I love the connections and the networking that I have received. When I look, for example, in my LinkedIn connections, and again, I've been applying for grad school, so LinkedIn resumes are a big part of my life right now. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing there are vice presidents from the community college that I'm friends with. There are deans from the community college and deans at the university level. I all of a sudden have this network of administrators, and I'm looking at social media posts or emails, and they've changed. They're turning into a direction of, well, Angela, what are your thoughts on this? And what should we do for transfer students? Or could you speak, at this event? And it's made this shift. And I've realized that my transfer education has given me, like I said, that confidence is huge. It's a huge piece, but it's given me skill set of public speaking, of, being able to share, to not be that student that's sitting in the back of the room that questions if they're supposed to be here or not. I don't question that anymore. I sit at the front and I'll ask all the questions I want to ask, and I'll include everyone around me. And I really feel that it's that transfer experience, that growth that I've had over the years, that's been just, I would not be the person I am today if I hadn't had that opportunity, that chance to actually grow. So yeah, definitely the network and the connections is just so huge, and they're going to stay with me, throughout my career, and it's going to continue to grow. And someday there's going to be a student that I worked with, and I'm going to be on her LinkedIn, and she's going to, it's just going to continue.
Yeah.
That support and those building connections.
I love what you're saying about how it builds not only networking and your connections, because you're literally at 2 or more schools when you transfer, but it builds your confidence. You almost gain more experience than you would just, starting at a 4-year school, and things of that nature. I love that. And I have to agree. It really does fill you with the confidence to go on and succeed and network. And you absolutely will be on the other end of the LinkedIn one day. Someone's going to be looking like, oh my gosh, I need to request Angela. Right. And that'll make my LinkedIn profile look all the much better. They probably do that now, Angela. Who are we kidding? They probably look at your profile now.
Go with that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But that being said, I would like to know, what's a tip then that you would want transfer students, to really take away from what you've talked about today?
And we're saying for students, my tip, and many times you'll hear from others of get involved. And yes, absolutely, yes, get involved. But I want to encourage, when I say involvement, not just clubs and events and activities, I want you to be involved with your education, with your advisors. I want you to ask questions. That is my biggest tip, is ask those questions. Your advisors, your professors, they are there because they want to be. I think sometimes students, and I'm saying this as a student, we can be intimidated. Well, here's this administrator who went to university of such and such and has a PhD, and I'm intimidated, and why would they want to hear my thoughts? That's not the case. They chose this profession because they want to help students be successful. They're engaged, they're focused, they're on this path with you. And so that's my tip, is to ask those questions and have those conversations. If you have an advisor, reach out to them like I did. Professor Nicole Dunn, when she was scheduled as my advisor, I had these questions of, well, what internships can I do? I want to work in admissions someday. What should I be doing? What resume building should I be doing? Constantly having those conversations. Like I said, she's the one that said, I have the perfect internship for you at the transfer center.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have asked those questions, if I wouldn't have had those conversations, if I would have just stood back and been intimidated and said, oh, I'm just a student, she's just there to help me figure out what classes to take. Instead, I went in there with, this is what I want. How can I achieve it? How can you help me? Or do you know someone who can? Ask those questions. That's what they want. And your professors too. If you're struggling in a coursework, or you have questions about APA format, which we all do, ask
Absolutely.
questions.
I love that you made the distinction between, like you emphasized, it's so important to get involved with your peers and your community, but it's also incredibly important to get involved with the faculty, with the educators you look up to, with the professors, with the advisors. But in that, not feeling intimidated by the positions they hold, but rather like taking that as inspiration, and following the individuals who are doing what you want to go on to do. I love that, because especially I think for community college students, it can be very intimidating when you're starting, you haven't transferred yet, to think, okay, so I should probably start building connections or building networks. And so just kind of taking this perspective of, don't be too intimidated, get involved with them. That's what they're there for. They want to help you. And then I would love to know a tip that you have that you would want to give to staff or faculty or educators who work with transfer students, and what they could do to help transfer students feel more empowered in their experience.
Definitely. And the great thing is it's the same answer. Ask questions. Administrators, and someday I'm going to be there, where I've been out of school for 15 to 20 years. And I forget what it's like to be a student. And I'm going to make these decisions for students based on my past experiences. Ask the student. Ask the transfer student. If you wonder if transfer students want something at a university, if you wonder what would help non-traditional students on the campus, I wonder if our parents on campus want a parent group. Don't wonder. Ask the students. Reach out to your student leaders and say, can you find out if our student community of non-traditional student parents would like a playground, or they would like more parent support groups? Ask those, have those students invited to the table. There are many times where I have been in meetings where I'm sitting there as a student, and the entire room is talking about students. They're talking about me. They're talking about plans for them, but not one of them is anywhere on the right path. And they're not inviting me to the conversation. They're not asking what I think.
Yeah.
And so it's the same answer. Ask questions. If you're an administrator working with transfer students, ask a transfer student. Yeah. Because a transfer student today is not necessarily the same as a transfer student 20 years ago.
Yes. And I was just going to say, that is so powerful and insightful, because like you said, it's such a rapidly changing environment, I feel. And the experience that a transfer student had even 10 years ago is not going to be the same, that they might have today, entirely at least. And bringing the students to the table. It's so funny when you said that, when you said, you were at that meeting and you weren't, feeling as included. I just thought, aren't these individuals meeting so that they could help the students? And isn't that the point
Yes.
of their roles and their positions, and asking the questions to the students, like, what do you feel like is most needed? And what kind of groups do you want to see meeting on campus? And that is just so powerful, Angela. Thank you so much for imparting that. Because a lot of there's both students and educators who listen to this podcast. So I'm so glad you gave that wisdom. But I want to ask, you're currently employed at Central Washington in the Transfer Center, specifically, like you said. Where can we find the Transfer Center on social media?
Well, we are on Instagram. It's CWU Transfer. You can also go to Central Washington University to their website and look up the Transfer Center. And that's where you will find Megan McConnell and her peer ambassadors, myself included. We are so focused on answering questions and being there for every transfer student, for every student, if you have questions or need advice. But that's where you can find me if you want to reach out. And yeah, absolutely. Transfer students and Central Washington University is my life right now. That and grad school application.
If you can, people are listening, people are watching, be sure to check out Central Washington University Transfer Center on social media, or even just take a glance at their website. There's a lot of inspiration there that you can glean from if you're an educator, creating your own transfer center social media or websites. But again, Angela, thank you so much for being on today, and everyone who's listening or watching, thank you so much. We hope that you took, a lot of great transfer tips and insight from Angela today, and that you'll tune in next time. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll sign off in Transfer Pride.
Thank you so much for listening. To continue the transfer conversation, be sure to join the Transfer Nation Facebook group at tinyurl.com/wearetransfernation. You can also follow us on Instagram at wearetransfernation and on Twitter at transferpride. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at tinyurl.com/tnationtube. If you have ideas for future episodes of the Transfer Nation Videocast and podcast, please email us at wearetransfernation@gmail.com. We can't wait to continue celebrating all things transfer with you. And as always, in Transfer Pride.